All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a highly provocative, honestly fascinating new report that forecasts a massive geopolitical shift. It's called The Harvest of Volatility, Europe's Path to Fragmentation 2032. We're going to unpack models suggesting the geopolitical map, at least as we know it today, is on the verge of a total rewrite. And the craziest part? The foundation of this entire shift literally comes down to the food on your dinner plate, agriculture. So the crucial question we're investigating starts with a startling core prediction from these models. Could the European Union really collapse by the year 2032? Now, for a highly developed, modern political union, that sounds almost unthinkable, right? But as we walk through the data and the historical parallels laid out in the source material, you are going to see exactly how the authors arrive at that specific, seemingly looming year. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the 2032 collapse prediction, then track the two distinct powder kegs, agricultural policy failures and wheat supply volatility, before moving on to the return of bread riots, and finally, the path to EU fragmentation. Starting with Section 1, the 2032 collapse prediction and these intersecting cycles of crisis. The whole foundation of the report's thesis is that we aren't just looking at isolated one-off problems. Instead, the models project immense political upheaval driven by three massive converging forces. We're talking about an ongoing sovereign debt crisis, widespread agricultural destruction, and escalating war. The report argues that it's the exact intersection of these specific cycles that is modeled to eventually trigger a full fracture of the European Union. Moving into Section 2, agricultural policy failures. Let's look at the internal catalyst happening inside the EU right now. The sheer scale of the localized disruption we're seeing is staggering. 11,200. According to the report, the EU is actively dismantling its own food security through aggressive climate change policies. For instance, to meet 2030 nitrogen emissions targets, the Dutch government is pushing to close an estimated 11,200 farms. And on top of that, another 17,600 are being forced to drastically reduce their livestock. So, why does a localized policy matter on a continental scale? Well, because the Netherlands isn't just a minor player here. It's Europe's biggest meat exporter and, frankly, its most efficient agricultural producer. The source material argues that targeting this specific nation acts as a kind of self-inflicted destruction of an incredibly vital agricultural base, which directly threatens the food security of the entire continent. But if we zoom out from the localized Dutch issue and look at the broader European scale, we hit another absolutely striking number, 1,000. And this isn't just some external fringe critique. This is an officially recognized trend. The EU Agriculture Commissioner actually admitted that Europe is losing 1,000 farms a day. 1,000 a day! The report points out that this rapid loss is deeply exacerbated by these internal climate initiatives, combined with what the authors describe as Brussels' deep-seated hostility toward fertilizers and genetically modified crops. Let's pivot to Section 3, wheat supply volatility, which serves as the external catalyst. We are basically looking at a dual-front pressure cooker right now. On one side, you have internal climate policies aggressively shrinking domestic food production, and on the exact opposite side, massive external war disruptions are severely choking the global market. So both sides of the supply chain are under immense simultaneous stress. When we evaluate those external pressures, we really have to look closely at wheat. The report introduces a genuinely fascinating historical theory. Wheat actually acts as a barometer for public confidence in government. If you look back through history, wheat prices reliably spike during periods of war, when there are fears of sovereign default, and during times of climate volatility. It's pretty much the ultimate indicator of societal stability. So what's driving all this current external volatility? The authors argue that the continued escalation of the proxy war with Russia virtually guarantees prolonged global wheat shortages. Essential grain supplies are essentially being weaponized. This is creating severe disruptions to both Ukrainian and Russian grain, actively preventing it from reaching the global market. And that brings us to a chilling intersection. Section 4, the return of bread riots and the historical collision. The models are forecasting what they call a phase transition super spike in wheat heading toward 2032. Now, what does that mean? It's basically a violent, sudden surge in wheat prices exceeding 300% in real terms. This is an absolutely crucial economic threshold. Why? Because it marks the exact point where agricultural shortages stop being just a frustrating burden on your wallet, and officially transform into a catalyst for political revolution. To really understand why that 300% number is so terrifying to economic modelers, we have to look at historical precedent. History dictates that whenever wheat prices spike above 300% in real terms, regime change or revolution typically follows within just 18 months. The report anchors this forecast in dynamics we saw during the fall of the Roman Empire and the French Revolution. So we're not just talking about a modern economic theory here, it's practically a historical law of gravity. And that historical pattern connects directly to this modern forecast. Because of the dual pressures we talked about, the internal farm closures and the external supply drops, food inflation is modeled to become completely unbearable. The report projects that severe bread riots will literally return to the streets of major European cities. Specifically, they're modeling places like Paris and Rome between the years 2029 and 2032. Finally, Section 5, the path to EU fragmentation, the decentralized breaking point. We are looking at an overwhelming collision of pressures here. You've got extreme agricultural shortages crashing right into an ongoing sovereign debt crisis, all while navigating a rapidly cooling climate cycle. According to the source material, it's the simultaneous collision of these three specific forces that will cause the continent's social structure to simply buckle under the weight. The core geopolitical conclusion the authors draw from all this is pretty stark. Centralized, one-size-fits-all management from Brussels is just fundamentally ill-equipped for this kind of localized resource crisis. The report concludes that during an era of decentralized economic depression and extreme civil unrest, the current bureaucratic structure is simply going to fail to manage the chaos. Which brings us to the actual chronological countdown projected by these models. Starting around 2028, the reports suggest member states will begin to independently abandon the Union, basically to reclaim their national sovereignty and try to manage the crisis locally. Then, from 2029 to 2032, we see those severe bread riots spreading as food inflation peaks. And finally, by 2032, the European Union, as it is currently structured, is forecast to fracture completely. We've covered a ton of ground today. We've unpacked the deep agricultural policy failures happening internally and the incredible volatility of the global wheat supply hitting from the outside. All of this leaves us with one essential, really provocative question to ponder. As we look at the data and those historical precedents, can highly centralized modern political structures actually survive basic localized resource crises? It's a profound question about the fragility of the systems we completely take for granted. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.